TV.
All right, welcome back and many thanks for staying with us right here on Morning at NTV. Now, yesterday, a very big story took center stage. Yes, the application by Mr. Differs, Basile and Hassan Twala was thrown out. Yes, they were seeking court to actually expel the deal that was expedited by the founding father of the National Unity, Reconciliation and Development Party, that is Mr. Moses Nkonge Chibalama, when he changed the name of the party from the National Unity, Reconciliation and Development Party to the National Unity Platform. So Mr. Differs Basile and Mr. Hassan Twala, they were contesting that. But guess what? Judge Musa Sekana said there was no basis for that because they did not file for a judicial review within the first 3 months when that name was changed, which should have been around July 6th. But get this, the applicants waited until August 24th, this same year. That is over a year. And that's why the judge said there's no basis for this argument. He also said there was no evidence adduced in court to ascertain whether or not Mr. Robert Chagulanyi did actually promise to give Mr. Moses Nkonge Chibalama $5 million. So he said there's no basis for that. And he also continued to say that the applicants in this case are simply looking for cheap popularity and some money during this election season. So we are going to be compounding on that delivery or that judgment by Musa Sekana. We shall also talk about another contentious issue. Yes, the NRM started refunding nomination fees to their candidates. I do have the NRM Communications Managing Director, that is Emmanuel Dombo, and we also have an aspirant for Kasanda Woman MP, Flavia Kalule Nabagabe, right here in studio. Very good morning, gentlemen and lady.
Morning, Romy.
Mr. Emmanuel Dombo, let's start with you. The National Resistance Movement started refunding nomination fees to candidates. We first want to know what is happening here. Why?
The NRM is refunding money to those who did not take it before the nomination date. You know, after primaries, I did inform the public that the responsibility of ensuring that the candidates go through becomes the responsibility of the parties. That's why there must be a primary or a process through which you become a flag bearer. And now what's the process of flying somebody's flag when somebody cannot meet the costs? So to those who were near Kampala and could take their money before, they took their money before nomination. Those who were up country and chose to use their money, becomes prudent that we'll fund it after they have paid for it.
So if I use my $3 million for my nomination, NRM is refunding me. That's ideally the issue.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Emmanuel Dombo. He is the Director Communications at the NRM. I also have Flavia Kalule Nabagabe. She's representing the National Unity Platform. You're going to help us make sense of the case yesterday. So what's the next plan? You won the case.
Thank you very much, Romeo, and good morning, viewers. We are extremely happy and excited that we are able to win the case. Yesterday, it was one of the high mountains that we had to climb over in order to become, I guess, more strengthened, but also more credible, because this case created some doubts, cases of doubt among the party, but also the leaders. We thank God first and foremost that we are able to win this case, and we also thank the courts, because they were able, especially the judge, was able to show the independence of the judiciary, which I think is very paramount for any institutions to develop, but also for democracy to progress and to grow in a country. Yes, and much as we know that there was an element of courts being independent, we have also come in full-blown contact with them, where they have on several occasions, not only as the NUP, but also as different opposition political parties, where they haven't been able to attain justice, where even we see that it's right there in front of us, and all the evidence points to that. But for the judge and the judiciary this time round to focus on the evidence that was brought out, and to probably overcome the intimidation probably that may have happened, because this was a very high-profile case that had several interested parties, and also to come out and say, announce itself clearly on why it was wasting time, the court time, but also just seeking, the spirit in which it came, the case was to seek for money, not to change any, you know, any case that comes up in court should ideally be changing a principle or changing a culture or a custom or a practice, but this wasn't one of those cases. So I think it's commendable that the judge was able to make that verdict and was able to give us that, albeit on email. It would have been better if we had received the news right in court.
COVID-19.
You know, no, but we are able to listen to the,
Yes.
you know, to the case right in court with a few of us in there. And so it would also have been very good to have it there. I think one is it shows the progress of the party. Now we all know that the NUP, which a number of people were doubting, is a credible party. As leaders, we knew that because we knew we had done everything. We had followed the law. We had done everything according to the law. We had followed our constitution, but also we had followed the Political Party Organization Act. So we, as leaders, the few leaders that were reported, we knew that we were on the right track. But of course, you cannot explain that to the millions of Ugandans that do not have access to this information. You can't tell them that everything is on book, much as we tried explaining it, but it created doubt. So that's the impact that this case brought out for the NUP.
And do you agree with Justice Musa Sekana when he says that the applicants, that is Hassan Twala and Mr. Differs Basile, they were seeking cheap popularity and also to make some money during this election cycle?
Of course, I do agree entirely with him because everyone could see it. It was crystal clear that this case had no... It wasn't going to go far because all the evidence pointed out. I mean, we were in court and the former president, Chibalama, himself confessed that the party leaders were voted in line with the constitution, that we did not break any law. He accepted that Chagulanyi Robert Sentamu is his president and he belongs to the National Unity Platform and all... I'm glad that I was part of all these processes as they were happening. So we all knew that there was a case of intimidation and coercion on the part of, on some strange elements that
Where
were
was that
forcing
intimidation and
Chibalama
coercion
to do
coming
that.
from?
I guess it was from the state because we saw Chibalama and Simbwa who were abducted and taken away, and we are looking for them. And these are people that we used to talk with on a regular basis at office. They are part of the staff at office, the administrative staff at NUP. So by the time we started getting in touch with them, they just disappeared. And when by the time they arrived in court, the man himself confessed that he needed freedom. He needed to gain back his freedom, that he was in a place which he didn't know. And so there was so much contradiction around this case. But what I want to highlight is the fact that this case, its timing disrupted so many NUP activities because it came right on the eve of nominations for members of parliament and for some other candidates. So this took us aback for some time because those that wanted to contest under the NUP, some of them chose to go as independents, which affected our numbers because I know that NUP right now would have had the highest number of opposition
like
MPs. Yes, but this was we were affected by this. We also I have a number of women under the women wing who kept calling me, trying to ascertain whether they should contest as independents or as NUP, trying to weigh all the pros and cons. And of course, I would encourage them. But you know, women also have the push and the support and the influence, the great influence of the husband. So many spouses were worried and saying, no, you may end up going here and something else may come up. We have seen a lot how women's issues have been highlighted in this politics and how the spouses, the husband's influence looms very largely over them.
Essentially, you're essentially saying this judgment should have come before nomination.
Exactly. It should have come much earlier because when they even pushed it after nominations, it made the situation worse.
Indeed. Mr. Emmanuel Dombo is the communications director at the NRM. He's also here. He's going to be countering that accusation coming in from the National Unity Platform that seems to indicate that the party NRM, which is in power, had something to do with this whole case. Coercing Moses Nkonge Chibalama, the founding father of the National Unity, Reconciliation and Development Party. Is this true, Mr. Dombo?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate my colleagues for coming over this because this is the right thing to do because we're all human beings and when we achieve something, we need to be congratulated. But I want to tell you that it's not... When they met Chibalama and they had their transactions, NRM wasn't there because that was an NUP thing and I think they followed the procedures like they did. But could be they didn't explain to all the other members of the former party was called what?
National Unity Reconciliation.
National Unity Reconciliation. That's where the problem started. NRM did not recruit those people in the National Unity Reconciliation. NRM did not publish anything. The only thing I want to...
But we saw Moses Nkonge Chibalama being kidnapped by security forces.
The security said he was under custody for his own security.
From what?
That is the best thing that Mr. Chibalama should tell us. Because that issue was clarified.
Because in court he mentioned that he wanted to assume his freedom once again.
And I think he has it. But to us, when NRM went to the bush, what did they go to achieve?
Freedom.
Freedom and rule of law. So that people, all litigants who have any issues, can go before the courts of law,
right,
argue their case, and come up with a satisfied outcome. Those who aren't satisfied still have an appellate process they can go through to ensure that they get justice. And when this happens, it really demonstrates that what NRM fought for is after all taking root. But the only thing I wouldn't want, could be I want to advise my young sister, that there were connotations of imputations as if for saying that even when the judges were under pressure. I wouldn't want to say that. I want to tell you that even the most developed countries, you have had cases being argued, one side winning and being reversed at the appellate level. Not that because people are under pressure, but because the interpretation of the law may differ according to circumstances or to individuals. There may be political leanings in many political judgments. When you look to the US, you find somebody is skewed either on the left or on the right. Right now, there is a public hearing for nomination of one of the justices of the Supreme Court in the US. And everybody is arguing to say, why now, why not after elections? Purely because they believe that once one judge comes on, maybe skew the outcome of the results. But us as the NRM, we congratulate you, but want to assure you that you are benefiting now from the processes and the struggles that NRM has done. And that is how NRM is securing the future.
Let's talk about the implications of this case, Mr. Emmanuel Dombo. You had experts who were saying if the National Unity Platform loses the case, that would mean most of the aspirants on the ticket would have to vie as independents. Right, so that would mean if they enter parliament, they wouldn't assume a majority. But then as it is, they have a party. They did it legally. Aren't you afraid that these young people might sweep most of the seats within parliament, even if President Museveni wins the election, and impeach him?
The struggle right now in the opposition is basically struggling who will become the leader of the opposition. That is all they're struggling for. Because everybody seems to know that President Museveni right now, when you go by opinion polls that have been published, when you go by the real polls that have also taken place, right now we have had the district elections for the youth throughout the country. And in over 69 districts, we have had the NRM leaders coming unopposed. These are the numbers which demonstrate and can point that the likely outcome of the coming elections is that NRM is going to perform extremely well. We already have members of parliament who are waiting to swear in. You can't
6 of them.
who are waiting to swear in.
Yes.
When you look at those, you can see that the narrative has already been started. And no wonder for us, last week we had nothing to do but to unveil the portrait of our candidate, because we received a certificate from the Electoral Commission to say that we have certified all the processes, and now we are waiting for the date of nomination. So all what they are arguing for is basically who will be the leader of the opposition.
And that essentially seems to be the reason why this case was in court in the first place, to stop that from happening. But then, Flavia Caroline, let's talk about political financing in Uganda. Last week, we saw the release of 15 billion meant to be equally shared among political parties in Uganda. But then what happened, government did not adhere to Section 14B of the Political Parties Organizations Act, which actually warrants general funding to be, general elections to be funded on equal basis. Instead, we saw people being funded based on representation. Biggest share going to NRM with 293 legislators. What is the government afraid of?
Thank you very much, Romeo. I think before I respond to that question, I just want to highlight that for the case of NUP and the court case, I think it's important and we saw this coming out clearly, that all systems continue serving citizens of the country rather than serving only, serving according to an individual's interests. Because if they do that, then we shall see institutions outliving individuals and concentrating on service delivery for citizens, which can actually take the country forward.
But the good news I have for you, Flavia Kalule, is that you have a new Chief Justice, Alfonso Winnie-Dolo. He is a revolution on his own. So go ahead.
And we are looking forward to the work that he's going to be doing. You know, these cases come up to judge them, but also to put them on a weighing
He's
scale.
He's a great man. I'm sure he'll do a great job during the election.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So now about political financing. Well, over time we have been crying over political financing, and over time we have been talking about political financing and its implications. Right now, elections in Uganda are extremely expensive and costly for so many people, including the first-time contenders, but also people who are not already in those positions. For example, people who are not incumbents in different positions. So for a country that is so young, with such a young population, this has become extremely discriminatory for so many young people to get involved in politics, which shouldn't be the case. Now, ideally, political parties should be funded, and like you have stated it rightly, the funding is supposed to be on equal basis, not on numbers, basing on numerical strengths within the party, because that is how we are going to grow and develop political parties, which in a multi-party system is a good thing, is a key thing to promote, so that we can have more people coming up and we can have political parties being able to facilitate and create an enabling environment for their members.
Do you believe this is done deliberately to underfund parties so that NRM has an upper hand?
Well, I would say they have refused to adhere to the to Part A, to Section C of the law, because they have the numerical strength, and so it is working on their side right now. But if tables were to be turned, would it still be working on their side? Would it be working for the opposition? I think for us, we shouldn't do things basing on just an individual party or an individual person or an individual as a person. We should be doing things that can cut across and that can cross over generations to come and can facilitate even other people that are going to join these spaces. So right now, it's important that we look at the equality that is there, that promotes participation for everyone, because political parties are struggling. Look at an example of NUP, which is just about 4 months old. And we have had this numerous rise and inflow of so many candidates that have wanted to contest under NUP. But we did not have the funding, and we are struggling to raise our funding. And even the security operatives came into our offices, broke into our offices, and even stole the little funding that we had, that we are going to give.
23 million.
23 million that we are going to give to our candidates. So without the political party financing coming in to help us, and without us being able to lobby for resources from alternative sources, because people are giving us money and all that, but you also need this money. That means that it puts us in a very precarious situation, which gives the ruling party an upper hand, because they are already, the ruling party, the NRM and the state are infused. And so they are using partly resources of the Wananchi of Uganda, taxpayers' money, and partly now they are also getting our resources, by the which are still coming from us, funding their political parties, which is terrible, because at the end of the day, then we get to miss out on the credible people, the credible leaders. We had to lose some of our comrades who are very astute leaders that we are going to come into and change leadership in this country because of financing. So I think, one, we need to regulate political party financing on equal basis, but also we need to regulate how much money is spent during campaigns by individual candidates, so that you can be able to create some kind of level playing field. It can never be totally leveled, but you put up the minimum at least.
The good news is that Mr. Dombo Emmanuel is here and is going to be giving you his answers in the shortest time possible. Mr. Emmanuel Dombo, the reason why the NRM went to the bush was to resuscitate freedom and rule of law, like you mentioned before. So why is it that the NRM party has been adamant, or the NRM government has been adamant, to honor Section 14C of the Political Parties and Organizations Act, which says, in respect to general elections, Section B, general elections, funding of political parties shall be on equal basis. Why are you not adhering to that? And instead, you're implementing Section C, which says, in respect of day-to-day activities of a party, yes, funding shall be based on numerical strength.
One of the things you should note is that this is an issue of interpretation of the law. When should it be taking place? The last time parties received money from government or from the Electoral Commission is about 3 quarters ago. And progressively, parties have been accumulating expenses which they hadn't paid for. It just becomes prudent and an issue of common sense that when you bring money now, the parties must begin dealing with the areas they have accumulated before you even begin talking about the elections.
So that's why they feel like it's little money.
This is the same money. I want to believe, because I'm a beneficiary, I wouldn't be the right person to be talking this. But I want to tell you that for us as NRM, we have rent areas for almost a year. You have seen some of our officers being evicted in the districts, purely because government hadn't released the money in time, or the money wasn't there. So when the money gets released, what do you begin with? Do you begin with the elections, or do you begin with the outstanding issues or commitments already which you have gone in? I believe that must have been the argument within the ministry, but I don't know whether NUP is a member of the IPOD, because the parties have got a forum through which they can be discussing. That's one of them. But the bigger problem is even to determine which party should benefit. That concoction or that agreement that we made when I was in Parliament at that time, when we said parties which are represented in Parliament, even that has its own good, but also it is also unfair to parties like NUP, which have just started. When somebody crosses from one party to another, should we consider them at that transitional year? That now those are members of NUP.
The good thing, according to the law, they say political parties and other political organizations.
So that's a debate which, when Parliament resumes, or when Parliament is constituted after elections, must be defined to find out how best. Because if you just say you are going to fund all parties, you are going to fund all the Chivalamas of this country, you are going to fund all the individuals.
Yeah, and there are about 86
How many?
parties. About 86 political
Then
parties.
they will become a million. Because everybody or every 2 individuals will be coming up to make their own parties. So it is still a bigger problem than what you are looking at. And when Parliament finally resumes, they must deal with it to find out who is the beneficiary. But for me, who had the problems talking for office for NRM when we get evicted out of offices. So is that because government hadn't paid our money?
So is that why you got the biggest share, because you had bigger debts?
I wouldn't know, because the decision was taken by the Electoral Commission and hopefully the Minister of Finance. They agreed and said, let us pay money according to the prorated, according to the numerical strength within Parliament. And because of that, I'll be able to fend off some of the challenges we've had as a party. But I'm sure there is room for discussion. If these were members of IPOD, they would bring it in the IPOD. There must be other forums through which all parties that are existing and are functioning should meet and discuss, find out how best this one can be improved. But for us, this has been a huge relief, especially because of the numbers that we have and the challenges that we have had because of government's failure. But the other thing I also want to add, how did the funding of political parties be? How did it come about? Because previously, in the previous legal framework, this wasn't provided for. But out of the wisdom and advice of President Yoweri Museveni, he said, if we don't begin building locally based organizations, locally based parties, we are going to be infiltrated by foreigners, and they'll begin influencing policies and requiring us to pursue their agenda. And this is something that has been done well, and the President Museveni has very good will. And it's something that he supported, and it requires only modification so that it can satisfy, but I'm sure it will not satisfy everybody.
All right, Dombo. Flavia Kalole Nabagabe, if this was an illegality on the part of the government, do you plan to sue in that regard?
Well, we have to first look at all the options. We have to first assess the spirit in which this came out. Because we don't want to just be suing. We have to understand comprehend the basis, the spirit, but also what the law looks like right now and what needs reformation.
The law is clear, Flavia, that
yes,
this
it's
was
very
an
clear.
illegality.
It's very clear. It's an illegality, and like he had, Honorable Dombo has said, we can easily, this can be taken back to Parliament because Parliament's basic role is to...
The 11th Parliament after the election.
Of course, our Parliament, so that we can see how to reshape this law into something that's befitting for all political parties. Because as it stands now, it's discriminatory. But also, what we should be pushing for right now is for the Parliament, I mean for the law to be interpreted the way it is and to be implemented the way it is. So 14C needs to be implemented, not just looking at one section only. So we need to have that clearly out.
They actually have to implement section 14B.
14B,
yeah.
not C.
14B, which says in respect of general elections, funding should be equal, but for section 14C says funding day-to-day activities, numerical strength.
Thank you.
And of course, we are having this conversation with Mr. Emmanuel Dombo and Flavia Carolina Bagabe. At this opportune moment, we would like to discuss another issue that is contentious, police violence that we've been seeing being meted out on opposition loyalists and other citizens within this country. We do have Stephen Mbide, who is in Katabi, ready to talk to Mr. Hassan Kasinje to actually compound on the conversation. A very good morning, sir. What's the latest?
Yes, good morning.